What do you get when you mix a campground full of quirky characters, a mystery in every RV, and a best-selling author who's written faster than most people can read? You get Tonya Kappes. And today she's here with us. Hello, Tonya.
Oh,
How you doing?
I'm good, Eric. Thanks so much for having me. I was excited to get your message. And
Yes,
I love your
well,
background.
I thank you. I would like to say it's my background I have all the time, but I may have made it custom for you.
I've watched you a few times. I
So,
know. Thank you. I
yes.
really appreciate the effort. I love it.
Well, now that you are, hopefully coming into the Hallmark family, which we'll talk about a little bit, I figured it was good time for, some of the Hallmark sleuthers to get to know you because hopefully, everything goes right, they'll be getting to know you a whole heck of a lot more. So,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
exciting. Super exciting.
So before we start with that, one of the things I've discovered about you is that you pretty much release books faster than most people read. So, like, what is your secret sauce for just being able to produce at such high volume?
So as you can see, I'm in my camper. And so I am a empty
Wait,
nest
wait, wait.
mother.
That's
I'm
like
in the
a,
camper. Yeah,
I
this is
thought
my
that was a
camper.
virtual background because it is
Mm-mm.
seriously
No,
so clean. So,
no, it's my camper.
wow. I knew you had said it. Okay. Well, just
I mean, I could give you a tour if you wanted one.
for anyone listening, her camper is nicer than my living room. It is gorgeous. Okay.
So it's yeah, it's an RV, so it's a drivable, as you can
Right.
see. And then we have there are no bump outs, which usually they're bump outs. And then
Right.
we have I mean, I could take you. Like I'm just this kind of a person, Eric. You probably don't have
Okay.
all the time in the world. But I have my wall of my pictures for my kids because they don't come with us. They're adults. And then we have, our a bathroom in here, and it's got a sliding door, but the sink is over here. So my husband's in there getting ready, then I can be out here getting ready. And then we have our bed, and we have like several storage. Of course, a blanket with all my kids' faces on it, because and then my cat travels with us too. And so my husband made her litter box down there, and
That's
then
crazy.
yeah, and she has a cubby hole like way down there to hang out in. And then this is her whole area up here, and he made her a cat tree. And I walk her on a leash and the campgrounds, and people um I get a lot of, is that a cat? And then somebody will say, on a leash. And I'm like, is that weird?
It is.
So, well, it's not, but but a lot of people think it's so funny but people sometimes will bring their cats, but they just don't go outside.
All right. So back to your question.
I
By
know,
the way,
I
your
forgot it.
camper
I'm
is
a squirrel. I'm
it's
a
crazy.
squirrel.
But I guess maybe
So,
that's the answer to how you're able to write
oh,
so
that's
fast.
right. So also I am, like I said, I'm a mom of four grown men. They're between the ages of 26 and 31 with twins in the middle at 27. And my husband and I also, when not traveling, we live in 145 acres of woods. And there's nothing really much for me to do. So I'm empty nest. So I write on a schedule. I used to be a teacher that transitioned and then became a child therapist. And then that's when I found writing when my kids, were in elementary school. And so I didn't put out obviously as much books then, but since they started college and then as they got older, and I found myself having so much time, but I've always, as a writer, um, acted like, even though I'm at home, that I'm going to a job. So I get up every morning, I'll do my exercise, I will get, ready for the day, go into my office, put on real hard pants, clothes, and act like, do everything like you would do going to an office. So that schedule allows me, one, not only to run my author business, which my husband was able to retire from his job early about 3 or 4 years ago to come work for our company, which is my book business. And so I write anywhere from 3 to 5,000 words a day, at least 6 days a week. But if something comes up, I'm so flexible and I'm like, oh, yeah, I can go do that. But, most of my friends are still working. So, usually if we want to go out or do whatever, it's on the weekend. And so that is in cozy mysteries, anywhere, the written cozies are anywhere from 50,000 to 80,000 words. So if you can write, 3 to 5,000 words, a day, and I consistently write, I don't take off a day between books. So I finish one, and after I'm done editing it and sending it off to my editors, then I'm already starting another one. But maybe one day they'll get married and I'll have grandchildren and then I can spoil them and I won't write as much. I'm saving up till then.
All right, so I'm just doing the math in my head. That means you're knocking out a book every couple of weeks. Like,
And yeah, and then so I usually stay about 3 to 4 books ahead. So the book I'm writing now is set in the fall and Christmas. So I have two that I kind of do.
so writing that prolifically, how do you not burn out?
I have 9 series and I write consistently in about five. And so I space them apart when they're released. So I don't really burn out because I'm in those worlds and I love them so much. But I will end a series if I'm not feeling the characters, which the readers are like, wait, what happened? I'm like, well, I'm not necessarily ending it. I'm just not writing in it for a while. But then, one will come back like 2 or 3 years later and they're really excited. But it's just when the characters kind of stop talking to me is when I feel like maybe I've been burnt out of that series. But the current series that I'm writing in, I'm full full writing ahead, which as the camper series, is like 43 books deep. And that's just because I live it and I love it. And it just still pours out of me.
So writing so many of them, how do you like keep all your characters straight and everything? Do you ever get like, wait a minute, oops, wrong. That's the wrong story I'm writing in here.
No, so for each one of my series, yeah, I do old school. I do a lot of writing by hand. I type everything like the story, but for instance, like you get a book Bible, So when I was traditionally published, they would give you a book Bible with everything in it, like hair color, all the stores, who owns the stores. So for me, what I do is I will get a very cheap from like the Dollar Tree or the Dollar General store, those old black address books. And so maybe one of my characters is Eric. So I would go to the E and I would flip it there and write everything about Eric under there. So when I'm writing Eric, I can just have that. So I use that, like their own little address book.
So each of your series has its own address book?
I Yes. And
That's
so my readers love to when I show that, they're like, oh, that's so fun. So
that's fascinating. That's
yeah,
fascinating.
thank you.
So have you ever written two of them at once, or do you literally go one, finish it, then start another?
So in the morning, I will work on what I call my Project A. And so Project A is the main book that I need to finish for the deadline. And then in the I'll get up, in the afternoon and do some business things or, do a podcast. And then I will work maybe a 500 to 1,000 words on a Project B, which is the upcoming book. So whether that be the plotting of it, or maybe a scene of it. But I am a writer that starts from beginning to end. I don't like do a scene and pluck it in. So it'd be the scene that I'm writing in at that time. So by the time I'm done with my project one or A, then the project B becomes A. And I've already gotten a good chunk of that kind of written throughout the process of that. So I'll write in 2 books at once.
Are these all like completely outlined, or do you just flow?
No, I just flow. Now I can tell you that
That's
I
hard
always
for a
know.
mystery.
Well, I can. Well, so mysteries you write backwards, right? And so I know who the killer is, who got killed, and why. And then I can generally think of 3 to 4 really good suspects that will need the clues and the red herrings. I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes about 3/4 way through the book, who I thought was the killer is not the killer. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's not the killer. That's the killer. And so, but I've written it to where I could easily switch it up because as they talk to me and they're in my head, and who I think, like I said, is the killer, and then isn't the killer, because I've already planted those seeds that is like, oh, I thought it was going to be this person, but then when I planted the seeds, it ended up being a different person. So that happens maybe half the time,
Oh,
but
half
not
the time.
all the
That's a
time.
pretty high
Yeah, it,
percentage.
it is a very high percentage, but it's so fun because I get so excited and I get weird about it.
So, since you don't flow with the outline, have you ever gotten to that three quarters and instead of switching the character, you're just like, uh-oh, I'm stuck now. It like doesn't make sense anymore. Or
I don't really believe that that happens. Like a lot of people might call that writer's block, and I don't really
no, I meant like the
believe.
plot. Like
Oh, the plot
you're
that.
going along and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I've been going this way, but it doesn't make sense to like you're saying the killer or whatever like that, where you're just like, I don't know how to finish this last bit because it's not making sense.
So what'll happen is that if I change the killer, I'm like, oh, but this happened, but I'm going to need to go back and add
Okay.
something. So I can do that fairly quickly because I know the book so well that I've written.
And
And
you
then
wrote
when
it
I
about three
reread it,
hours before because of the pace you
yeah,
write.
I'm like, oh. But I will, of course, I'll go back and edit it before it goes back to my editor, or it goes to my editors. And so then I will catch what the new person, the new killer, the new bad guy, needs to be seen or on the page or something like that. So, and then you have to weave in all the subplots too. So I want to make sure that all that's
Right.
going in through there.
Yeah, I find it fascinating you're able to do mystery. Like I could see rom-coms or other things, but a mystery without an outline, I,
Well, I'm not
I'm
saying it's not an
impressed.
outline. Like I know all the things,
Right.
who they are, and I'm so into it as I'm writing it that it's always in my head. Like my husband will say, I'll wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and grab my phone and do a note memo, which are also even funnier. I have a Patreon like you, and my Patreons always get my voice memos and the middle of the night ones, and they crack up because they make no sense. And you're like, I'm like, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden you'll hear my husband say, who's talking to you now? I'm like, I'll hit the end. And so generally when I'm in that book, it's still fresh and I can quickly fix what needs to be fixed. And then sometimes if it doesn't make sense, then my developmental editor, she'll be like, whoa, this just did not make sense. And luckily, they can find that.
So, did you start self-publishing and then switch to having an editor and everything, or have you always had an editor?
Okay, so first, what happened is it's kind of a long story, Eric. Um, I started back again in 2010, and so I didn't know anything about writing. I was again a therapist, but two people had told me, "Oh my gosh, you should tell that story. You could write a book." And I'm like, "Really?" And so I thought, that's interesting. So the next day, because I didn't discover reading until I was in my 30s, and so you know, I was like, "Oh, if I could help somebody escape how reading had helped me escape at that time in my life." Then I was just going to do that and continue to be a therapist. And so my husband's like, yes, you can do it. You can tell a good story. But I'm like, yeah, telling a story and writing a story are probably two different things. So when someone, said, two people said you should write a book, that got my wheels turning. So the next day I went that was when they had a lot of big bookstores that aren't around now,
Right.
Walden's Books, and I got me a cute little journal. And my kids all played sports, so I football practice. I started writing my first book under an oak tree on the Ohio River because you couldn't leave when they were little kids in case they needed to go pee or they needed a snack or something like that. They were too little to leave, so I wrote my first book there, and I had it actually got sold to a publisher, and I actually started going to like writing classes or local writers groups and things like that so I could learn everything I could learn. And then it got picked up and it was a rom com because, well, I thought it was a rom com. And then my friend's like, are you sure this isn't a mystery book? Because there's more dead bodies than then the guy and the girl kind of give each other the side eye. They don't even kiss. I'm like, oh, I think it's a rom com. But regardless, so but the publisher and I ended up splitting ways a few months before it was published. And so my husband had a Sony e-reader before the Kindle. And he said, "Have you ever heard of the self-publishing?" I'm like, "I could never self-publish. That's that's vanity publishing at the time." And as a matter of fact, I got kicked out of a writing group because I did decide to self-publish it. But that's okay because a few years later, they were paying me to travel the United States to teach their other writing groups how to self-publish. So I quickly self-published and found a lot of success in that and made the USA Today bestsellers lists and things like that. And so I was one of the very first that started in the industry doing that. And then, of course, Kindle came along and it was great. And then one of my series was discovered by HarperCollins, and they had asked if I was like one of their very first self-published authors. And so that I went with them. They took the series. I let them have the series, and we did about 6 books. And then I said, "There's not much more you can do for me than I can do for myself." At that time, and I'm pretty business savvy, and was doing my own book signings and doing all those things, and I'm holding my own reader events. I have my own reader event every year on a train somewhere in the United States. We go all over, and we do mystery theater. That's how I meet my readers, and so I just never looked back. I've done other couple of other traditional publishers, and then just at the end, end up getting my rights back. So just recently, I got my rights back to my HarperCollins books, which I'm super excited about. And those hopefully will be somewhere also to watch. But anyways, so I'm super excited about that. And I love traditional publishing. It's just that in today's world, there's nothing I can't do for myself at this point that they are doing for me.
So when you first started using an editor, though, was it kind of like hard on the ego because you're writing it and now you have someone who's kind of chopping it apart or like saying no, this, that, and the
Yeah.
other?
So with HarperCollins, it was kind of an eye opener for me because it's the first time I was traditionally published. So I was like, wait, what? And they were like, oh, and I write with Southern phrases. I write the way I talk. And they're like, you can't really write the way you talk. I'm like, yeah, I can, and I am. And so we kind of had to come to that, agreement. And so the Southern phrases are all in my books, and I can do that. And so they kept them, and those were the things I think that mostly get dinged and people don't really understand. And they're like, what? And, like it's been raining in Kentucky and tornadoes all over. And, we always say, oh my gosh, it's a frog strangler out there. And so people are like, what does that mean? I'm like, well, frog strangler, if a frog is out in the water, in the rain, it's going to kill them because they're, sitting there. So people don't really get a lot of my Southern phrases. But over the years, my readers have gotten to know me, and they've gotten to know that's just kind of how I talk and how I write. So editors, when I have an editing service that I use that are professional editors, that a lot of editors from at the time were like the big 8 publishing houses, which now there's like really 3. But back then, a lot of them were doing side hustle and side gigs on like, oh, I can also, edit for these indie authors and work at the big, publishing house because they have the knowledge. So I actually have an editing service that I use that have a bunch of those awesome retired editors from publishing houses. So it goes through about 4 rounds of edits. And then I also have a beta reading team of about 100 and 100 ARC members. So, but in self-publishing, you're always going to find some mistakes, which is kind of, but there's mistakes in other, in traditionally published books too. But we try not to, but I don't have a big ego to do that. And I always say, please give me the mistakes. Give me the mistakes or what you see, even after they're published, because I want to put the best product out there for the reader. And so I'm not gonna, it's no sweat off my back. Listen, I make mistakes. I'm human and I want to correct them if I can.
As long as they don't try changing your southern phrases.
Yeah,
That's
that was
now
something
that's
I'm
not
not,
okay.
yeah, that is not okay.
I,
So,
well, we debated this on our podcast the other day. Where do you stand on the Oxford comma?
oh, I don't. I let the editors do that. They're always changing my commas. But that is probably one of the hardest things for me to get right is always where the correct punctuation goes. But yeah, I saw that episode and you and Andrea just cracked me up.
Thank you.
And so uh I just, they're always saying, well, you're always placing it wrong. And I'm like, well, then you fix it because that's why I pay you to do it. So,
Exactly. So if you had to switch lives with one of your characters, who you picking?
oh gosh. Um, well, I guess we can say May. She's my most popular, because she was like a fish out of water when well, she thinks she's a fish out of water. But uh, and she had to do like the whole camping thing alone and had to learn it, how to get in an RV, and try to, to get to a campground that she's going to sell, but she doesn't realize that it's not very pretty because the brochure that she had gotten, was this beautiful campground, but she didn't realize it was a brochure from like the 1960s when it was beautiful. So when she gets there, it's terrible. But I think what I like about her is that she's so resilient and she was able to be a chameleon to get things done. And sometimes, as a mom, I'm like, no, this has to be done this way. But I think I like how she was able to kind of go with the flow. Then she was able to make some friends, and able to turn not only just the campground around, but the entire tourism around of the town. And so I like that she's a go getter. And I'm a go getter as well. And so I think that I really resonate a little bit of me and her. I was a camper growing up with my parents in the Daniel Boone, and just having that ability to put that in her. I think I see a lot of myself in, minus the dead bodies, because I would be the first one to call the police and be like, y'all deal with it. And so I think that, it was a lot of fun that I would see myself maybe trade place with her because I could probably live in a campground for sure.
Well, let's get into camper and criminals then. How did Mae West and the whole campground concept like come to you? Is it just because you are, a camper girl yourself and you're like, why don't I just kill people while I'm at it?
So that that's a loaded question. So I did grow up with my parents having a Winnebago, and we would go camping, and it's so much fun. And it's one of the, I mean, we went everywhere too. I mean, my parents, we would go on a lot of vacations, but my most fond was going to fond memories is going to a campground and almost drowning in a creek. Which is fun. Taking the watermelon when we got there and sticking it in the cold creek, and that's where we would go grab it and cut it up at night and run around the campground and get to meet a lot of people. And so May, when I thought of the concept, it was actually like during the whole Bernie Madoff thing, and I'm like, whatever happened to his wife? And you'd see her a little bit on TV. I'm like, oh, let me tell you what happened to his wife. And so I kind of did the concept of that with her husband,
Okay.
Paul West. And so my cover artist, she is a independent cover artist, and so she will have what's called a cover artist auction. And when the first three books, because I was actually going to call it the Laundry Club ladies,
Okay.
um, because one of the most gossip place when you go to a campground is not just the campfire, but if they've got a laundry room or if you have to go do the laundry in the town. They sit in there and they talk and you learn all sorts of things. And I thought, oh gosh, wouldn't that be funny if it was called, I was just going for the funny part of the Laundry Club ladies. I never knew that people would actually like go crazy over it. And so, when I was thinking about what is the cover is going to look like, what's it going to be named, and so my cover artist had these three camping covers that were going to go up for auction. And I thought, those are the covers. Those are exactly the covers. And she had come up with the titles and the name of the series. And all we had to do is just slap my name on it. And so I won the bid. And so we've not looked back. She's done every cover since. And so that's kind of how the
For all your books or
names.
just the series?
She does a lot. Like she's done probably three-fourths of my
Okay.
book covers. Um, and so when you get but good on her. Once you get a series that takes off really well, then all the indie authors want to book her for their covers. So, but she's great. And shout out to Mariah. But anyway, so she actually had come up with the covers, and then from there, I'm like, oh, it's definitely a camping series. And in college, I went to the Daniel Boone. I grew up in central Kentucky, and went to the Daniel Boone, the Gorge a lot. Daniel Boone Days is a real thing. I'm getting ready to do that in July. I'm going there this weekend camping. So, it's great down there. And so I thought, oh my gosh, how many, bodies can be found in the Daniel Boone, a lot. And I don't know if you saw like a few months ago, that guy that had shot, like was shooting on the interstate down in the Daniel Boone. It made national news, but you might not have seen it. And he was hiding in the Daniel Boone the state police and the FBI were all looking for him. And it wasn't until these two local people that were like on watch, they were like on a podcast with the camera, until they saw the buzzards. They saw two buzzards, and the next day they saw four. Then they saw like six buzzards. And then when you get more than six, you're thinking something really is dead there. And so they found the guy's body, and he had shot himself. But that's the thing, you can find, it's so hard to find, people, you get lost, the rangers. So it was a perfect setting. And that's how I came up with it. And then my knowledge of camping and having an RV, really, and, doing the stinky slinky, which is the Clark Griswold famous thing, learning how to hook all that stuff up. And May had to learn all that. But interestingly enough, there is a group called Sisters on the Fly, and they are an all female, all ages camping group. And I belong to them. And the rule is they have meetups at different campgrounds. They're international all over the world, but they have meetups. And sometimes I go to their meetups. No men are allowed. And they're a hoot. We have line dancing. They have all the potlucks. They have some sort of craft or something that they have. But you would see these women that are 80 years old driving their car with their little Can-Am trailers, or, their cute little trailers behind them for a weekend. And I mean, it really is a culture that a lot of people don't realize. But I think my series really ignited during COVID, when all the younger people were working at home. It's like, we're going to go, we call it work amping. And so they were able to hit the road during COVID, and the younger folks, like, 20s and 30-year-olds, started picking up my books, and they always say, oh my gosh, this is like Schitt's Creek in a campground. And so that's how it started really taking off during, COVID and things like that, when people were discovering camping. And um, your age of readers for this genre is anywhere from like 45 to, death. And so when young girls were moving home, or young men were moving home with their families, they kind of started swapping books. And so the moms that read my books were starting to read the romance rom-coms, and then their children were starting to read these quirky, cozy mysteries. And, this really resonated. So,
So if Happy Trails Campground was real, what would be the signature cocktail?
oh my goodness. Well, it would have to be a
Yeah, I was
bourbon.
going to say it have to be
Um,
bourbon.
yeah, it had to be a bourbon martini. Those are good. I wouldn't pick the mint julep, although, that's huge for our derby. But probably like a bourbon martini for sure. And I
Love it.
did actually put a body in a bourbon barrel in one of the books.
I was about to say, being a camper and everything, have any of the crazy actual experiences been too crazy to make your book?
So a lot, oh yeah, because I'm like, oh, I'm afraid they're gonna read it, but you can kind of switch it up a little bit. But yeah, I've read a lot. I've met a lot of characters. You meet them a lot around campfires. When it's a lot of drinking going on in campgrounds is where, you get the crazy people with the guns on their hips, or, they're not shooting each other, but they might shoot up in the air and you're like, oh my gosh, what was that? And then they get kicked out of the campground and, some things like that. But for the most part, the campgrounds are generally a great community to be part of, and warm and welcoming. So, but you do hear a lot of crazy stories. So, and then also in campgrounds, you can have people that are staying there for like months, and they have like long-term camping spaces, and they're there for like a job or something weird, and they have good stories from people that came in that had to leave, and but most of them are pretty good. So I have a couple that I do keep close to the cup and thinking, how can I incorporate that? But because they got kicked out, but I haven't done that yet.
We talked a little bit right before I started recording that one of the appeals you think of your series is that you have a lot of quirky side characters, multi-generational and everything. Which one of them do you think deserves their own spin-off into their own series?
So, if you were to ask, so initially I thought it was going to be, her name is Queenie French, who is a Jazzercise instructor, and I again take Jazzercise. I know Jazzercise is so old, but really it's not. I love it. I do Jazzercise, which is hilarious. And so I thought she was going to be, but it ended up being Dottie. And Dottie is after my aunt Dorothy, short red hair, smoker. Always putting in the sponge curlers, um, hilarious Southern sayings to the core. So she's your main Southern saying is who you get your Southern sayings from her. And if I don't put enough in the book, the readers will say, "Oh, there wasn't many Dottieisms." That's what they call them. And so there wasn't many that this time. And so I'm like, well, I didn't know y'all were counting. But I think she could have her own um, she could have her own show. She could have her own podcast. She could have her own everything. But she's so big. She's bigger than me. I couldn't stop her if I tried. That I don't even know if I could even write her to do her justice, because the readers like dress up for her now on Halloween. They send me pictures of them dressed up. I do Zoom calls with my readers. We do a Halloween party, and you've got like, a few thousand people on there, and half of them are dressed as Dottie and these curlers and this red hair at the cigarette. And she's a chain smoker, which a lot of my readers, well, some of my, not a lot of my readers love it, but I'll get some readers that'll say, you do know smoking is bad for you, right? And I'm like, yeah, and my aunt did die of a stroke. So, but, I'll keep writing it. And so I think that, when you think of a true Kentucky, because there's a difference between Southern and hillbilly Southern, right? And so I think when you think of a true Kentucky, Central Kentucky, down in the holler. She is a perfect example, but also so loving at heart. That's why I think the readers, love her, because at the end of the day, she's the one that you would call in the middle of the night, and she would be there, no questions asked.
So if we're lucky enough and the Campfires and Criminals gets all the way to being on the Hallmark channel, Mystery Channel and everything like that, have you given any idea who you would love just to be cast as May? Like in your dream thing, like when you envision her, who do you
Oh,
think she is?
I don't have anybody that comes to mind. I have who they have, but I don't have who I would have. And
Doesn't have
so,
to be a Hallmark. It can be literally anybody in the world when you
yeah,
envision her.
I I don't, maybe a good character I think could be like an Anna Faris type of person. I think she's fun. Because I thought she's always funny and she's just kind of like, wait, what? So I think she is fun. And, I just don't know. I don't know who could really pull off. Because, May doesn't really, so that's something interesting. Because not everybody, and I don't know if you think I have an accent, but not everybody in Kentucky has the accent. See, I can't hear
I'm
it.
sorry, but that may be the funniest thing ever said on the podcast.
So I
Do
don't
you
hear
think I
it,
have an
right?
accent? Oh boy.
So, and you and I talked, do know that the producers did come and stayed with me, and they wanted to go to my hometown where I'm from, and so they were like kind of shocked that not everybody has such an accent like me. Like my husband does not have an accent, and only one of my boys has the accent, and so and May in my head does not have the accent.
Well, she's from,
So
oh
I
no, she was from there, but she moved to New York and then came back, right?
Right. And so and that might be one of the things that's changed on the show. Is that she might not ever be from Kentucky. So which is fine. But anyways, I've just never really pictured like you would always like say, oh, when they think of Southern, Reese Witherspoon. No, not for me. Because she does have an accent to me, and May does not have that. And if I could get Reese Witherspoon, I'm not going to say
Well,
no,
of course.
but you know what I mean. But in my head, I'm not thinking. I'm thinking of like someone that's like fish out of water. When they get in those
Right.
situations, they're like, "Wait, what?" And I think of the show Mom with Anna Faris, and it
Right.
cracks me up because she was kind of working, hustling to keep the whole family afloat and work her job and kind of trying to come out smelling like a rose and always coming up against things. So that's who I kind of picture as because I'm thinking TV show wise, I'm not
Right.
thinking like, yeah. So do you have anybody in mind? Did you read it at all? Because if
Well,
you didn't
no,
read it,
no,
it's
what
not
I
gonna hurt my
find
feelings.
fascinating is I never envisioned her being blonde, and it seems like,
Oh she's not, but I was just
yeah,
thinking on acting skills. Yeah.
right. When you first started writing it, did you, or just when you started writing, did you ever really think like at some point these are potentially TV movies or anything like that? Or was it just, hey, I'm writing books and books and books, and when the idea of turning it into an actual TV series, was it just like, wait, what? To kind of catch you off guard?
Yeah. So the day it had gotten a lot of attention way before it got the second round. So this is kind of like the second act of this book. Um, and you're right, things can go sideways real quick. But I knew it was special. I knew something was there in my heart because because the reason why I picked the multi generational women is because as a sleuth, you can gain a lot of knowledge through other generations and how to do things, how to properly do things as a Southern sleuth, how to go about things with casseroles and, Southern, we call it, I'm going to Southern file. They think that they're pulling the wool over our shoulder or over our eyes, but then when they turn around, they're like, wait, how did that happen? I was the one leading and now she's leading. And so, so I knew that there was something special. Also, not a lot of books had been written in Kentucky. And I knew I wanted to bring that to Kentucky. Every book has something real in Kentucky in it. So a lot of the festivals that I write are real festivals down there. A lot of things like you wouldn't even know, like there is like racing, like race car racing in the Daniel Boone on those roads, and that'll be in August. But like you can watch a spectator at different campgrounds or at different parts of the cliffs, and like you don't realize all these things are happening if you're not really in Kentucky. And so I write about those things. So I knew that bringing that to life was very helpful to get people to Kentucky. And I have a lot of readers that send me pictures. I'm in the Daniel Boone. I'm trying to find happy trails. And I'm like, well, it's made up. You know. So when I was writing it, I felt it was special. And then about book 7, and I loved it, you know, and the more I'm excited about writing it, the better I feel like it translates to the reader. And so um initially it was bought as a movie. And well, that's what we thought. And so then it I got word on Zoom that they wanted it for the television show and on Hallmark Channel. So, you know, that was pretty big, I felt like. And I was like, what? Because I never would have pictured it to be that. And so that was pretty exciting, you know, and that was a couple of years ago. So, you know, you're still, you know, so far out because it takes a while to get all that. And of course, it was super cute because um, when I don't know if you know how all that works. Like, you know, you do a shopping agreements with
Right.
the producers, and then once it's optioned, you do that with the network. And then you have no more contract with the producer because it's been fulfilled. And then they have their own contract with the network, and I have my own contract with the network. So it was really kind of cute because they didn't really know. They were like, how do we do a with the self-published series? So we went to like a option to purchase contract instead of going to the option, and then you know, and then they're like, and how many books do we do, and do we do this? And there is actually a spinoff. I didn't tell you who that was, but there is a spinoff that they questioning whether they needed to take the spinoff, but ultimately they didn't take the spinoff. But there is a spinoff with a side character, which was a reporter, Violet Reinhammer, that I write as well, but it's not nearly as popular as the Camper series. And she's not even in Happy Trails or Daniel Boone anymore. She's not normal anymore. So yeah, so you know, when I got news that it was changing, I was really taken back and shocked because it was never in my wildest dreams did I think it would become a show. But I did believe that it had enough legs while the early days to be a movie.
So if this gets made, are you going to insist on a cameo?
I think I'm already going to do that. So, you know, they said, "Oh, we definitely would love to have you in the writers' room and to, talk about the Southern thing." And they're like, "Oh, they're gonna, love you because I guess we're just we're just so easy to get along with." And I'm just like, "Yeah, this is great." And I don't know if really readers translate to television, so I think it's a whole different audience, for me.
I will say
Um,
a lot of our listeners read and watch the mysteries.
oh, good. I love that.
So
Yeah.
I think now, by no means I would say it's the majority, but
Right.
there's definitely a pretty good group who, because I'll get a lot of comments about people who get, upset that, well, that's not really true to the book, or, you know, compare it to the book, or just talk about another one of the episodes, the episodes of the book that they would love to become another episode. So I think
Yeah.
there's a pretty good crossover.
That's great to hear. I love that. Um, and also, as far as a cameo, I think that it's always up to the discretion of the producers. So not every author or writer of the books get invited to the set, but I'm sure that our producers will, ask me to come. We've discussed it, and they're amazing, and it'll be fun.
Well, if you get any pushback, Will Shortz, who you may know, he's the guy who writes like puzzles for New York Times. He did like the Sudokus and some crossword puzzles. He's the one who created crossword mysteries
Yeah,
for that was on Hallmark with Brennan Elliott and Lacey Chabert. And
yeah,
in the first 3 episodes, he had a cameo
yeah.
in each one of those. So you can just say, "Hey, listen, precedent set. Put me in there. I'll be in the laundromat throwing some,
Yeah.
dirty
I
clothes in, or
yeah,
whatever
I
the
could
case
do
may
the
be."
s'mores. But about the laundromat, the funniest thing recently, they're on the Kelly Clarkson show. I saw it on Instagram first, but there's a laundromat that is now exactly like the laundromat in my books that's in Charleston. And I messaged them and I followed them. I said, "Oh my gosh, I have this book series and this is amazing. This is exactly, what I have." And so they started following me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're like already on," they were reading the books. And then they were just recently on the Kelly Clarkson show because
Wow.
one of their producers saw the laundromat. And because it's a laundromat that's really changed the community there in Charleston where they're located. And they have Thanksgiving dinner, they have karaoke night, they have everything that the laundry club ladies do in the laundromat. So I love that. So that's really funny that just came to be. I'm like, "Oh," and I said, "We'll do a book signing." They're like, "We definitely do something here with your books." So that would be kind of cool.
Love it. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. This was a lot of fun. Do you have what's like because of the rate you publish, it's probably next week. But so what do you have coming up next? What can people look for?
So next, I actually started a new series, and it's a ranch series called the Bluegrass Ridge Ranch series. The first book, and that's coming out next month, and it's called Ranch and Red Herrings, and kind of the same thing, fish out of water. Yeah, we do have ranches in Kentucky. People are like, "Oh, aren't they farms?" I'm like, "We have farms. We also have ranches." And so she inherits her Uncle Amos's big horse ranch, and so, she again, is out doesn't know anything about a ranch, and early copies of that have gotten some great praise, and loving it. They're saying it's kind of like, Yellowstone, Heartland, and Heart of Dixie, with murder all put together. And I'm like, "Oh, this is like a great compliment." And so about a handful of people have said, "Uh-oh, this might be my new favorite series that you're
Okay.
writing. It might beat May." And I'm like, "Really?" And so, but they're also a lot longer. They're like a saga series. It'll be a series. And the covers are kind of vintage looking. I got a actual illustrator to hand draw them and do them. So it's a little different than what I normally write, and I'm really happy with it. So thanks for asking, and thanks for having me, Eric. I love
Well,
it.
before we go, why don't you tell people where they can find you and find everything, Tonya, that there is to know and about your writing and everything else.
Well, I'm at all the normal places: Instagram, Facebook, Patreon, and I have a website, TonyaKappes.com. So just Google me and you'll find something.
All right. Well, Tonya, thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good one.
This podcast was created by fans for fans and is not affiliated with or sponsored by Hallmark or the Hallmark Channel.